everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, Going Deeper in Service Learning, Evaluating Performance and Refining the Project. Today we are going to talk about strategies for evaluating your service learning and how to improve and refine your performance. Hopefully you will leave today with strategies, tools, and resources that will help you and others that you work with to improve and deepen your service learning practice. I just want to introduce myself, and while I'm introducing myself, if you guys want to go ahead and introduce yourselves by sharing your name, location, and organization in the chat box on your right, that would be great. My name is Elizabeth Koenig. I'm a professional development manager here at NYLC, and I'm joined by Marcus. He introduced himself before. He's the DSN Communications Coordinator. And again, if you need to communicate with us, feel free to use the chat box to share any questions and also to introduce yourself. So I'll give you guys a few seconds to do that. So you guys can keep introducing yourself. Oh, here we go. We have people from Special Olympics, North Carolina. It looks like some people from higher ed, from Tennessee. Also people from another higher ed, University of Minnesota, people from the Math and Science Center. So we have lots of people on today's webinar. It looks like from all over the country as well, from North Carolina, from Washington, from Kansas City, from Pennsylvania. So welcome to everyone today. Hopefully maybe you'll see some people you know online as well. And we're excited to jump in. So first we're going to talk about what does going deeper mean and why is it important? So going deeper is really at the end, and some may say at the beginning of the service learning process. As you can see in this visual here, it shows the pre-service, service, and post-service. And that arrow coming out of post-service is really where we're going deeper. So it's kind of trying to answer the question of now what? You've done all this learning and it's exploration and service, and what are we going to do now? So really by going deeper is important because by going deeper and increasing the intensity of the project, there are more opportunities for youth to make important decisions, more challenging and varied tasks, greater senses of ownership, more opportunities to apply content knowledge, and an opportunity for more rigorous evaluation. So an example of what going deeper can mean, this comes from a teacher tool that NYLC produced on duration and intensity. And the example here is really around service and the aspects of service in your service learning project and moving from direct service to advocacy. So really moving from addressing the current needs of your community to addressing the root causes. There's a couple examples here of what that means. A great example is going from serving meals to people living with HIV and AIDS to organizing a march to raise funds and awareness around HIV and AIDS research. So really by moving from direct service to advocacy and deepening that aspect, students are able to use different skills like public speaking and organizing to really deepen the impact on both themselves and then on the community as well. So today we're going to talk about going deeper in service learning, as I said. And a really good place to start with going deeper is assessing your project. To do this, first you need to assess your project, and then to move beyond that, you're going to identify areas for growth and improvement and also plan for the future. So this is kind of the process that you go through, as well as our agenda for today. So we'll touch on each of these areas, and hopefully you will gain some information and some new knowledge, and you'll be able to maybe share some knowledge that you have, and eventually be able to take this back to your community and to the service learning projects you are working on to share this with your colleagues and assessing your own service learning. So first, we're going to talk about how you are currently assessing the service learning that you're doing. So if you guys want to use the chat box again, like where you introduce yourselves, to kind of share how you are currently assessing your service learning. Are there strategies that you're finding effective and useful. And so we're really just looking for how do you know that your service learning is impactful and effective. So if you want to share those in the chat box on your right, I think there are many ways to really look at assessing your project. We'll talk about one specific today, but if you guys want to share yours. So there's definitely evaluations you can do, assessments of both students and community partners. There's research that can be done. A lot of assessment happens during the reflection stages of the service learning project. So some of the examples that are being shared here are pre and post testing students around civic engagement, doing an annual evaluation. Thanks to Paul and Kristen for sharing. So one is looking at how students are engaged throughout the project. I think that can be, maybe we can talk about how we can assess that and how we can make sure that's happening when we go a little deeper. So thanks to those people who shared. So at NYLC, we really focus on self-assessment. And self-assessment is the ability for a project staff to observe and analyze project components, judge the project's effectiveness based on rubric criteria, and make concrete plans to improve the project's performance. So NYLC really thinks that self-assessment is useful because you are the one who best knows your project and your situation and the culture that you're doing your project in. So it's really great for you to assess your project yourself. So before we jump into what self-assessment looks like, I really want to kind of touch on a few things around assessment. First, as you guys all know, working in service learning and working with youth and with educators, that assessment is integral to learning and improving. Without kind of looking at what happened and how it went, we aren't able to improve and to learn from what happened. So that's one of the reasons that we do assessment. The challenge of assessment also develops over time. So it's important that assessment isn't just kind of a one-shot thing, but that it happens on a regular basis. And that allows you to monitor your improvements and also to make changes. If you thought something was going to work and it didn't, this really allows you to make those changes. Self-assessment is also based on accepted criteria. So everyone who is assessing the project, whether it's a couple of educators, the youth, the community partners who might be assessing your project, everyone is kind of assessing on the same page. You're assessing on the same criteria. You're really making sure that everyone knows what to be expecting, so you're not assessing on multiple different things. And then finally, self-assessment is not about proving your project is exemplary. It's about identifying areas to improve. Self-assessment is an internal activity. You don't have anything to prove to anyone, but everything to gain from an open and honest assessment of your project. Self-assessment is done by people who know your project the best. So again, you, other educators, youth, or community partners. But it's really important to make sure that people are giving open, honest, and critical feedback of your project. So what does what can self-assessment look like? So NYLC has a self-assessment resource that focuses on the K-12 service learning standards for quality practice. The one self-assessment that you see on your screen right now is a rubric around partnership. And we're going to take a look at this rubric specifically today, but all of these rubrics are available on the GSN under the topic Going Deeper in Service Learning. So you'll be able to take a look at some of those there as well. So if we want to look at partnerships today, you can kind of see how this rubric is laid out. It's laid out from a level 1 to a level 4, and it really focuses on how partnerships can build on one another and what partnerships look like at these different levels. So if you guys want to take a few seconds to look at this rubric and then think about where you would rate yourself on the rubric. And it's important to remember, like we talked about before, to be open and honest, and it's okay if you're at a stage 1 or a stage 2, but to really look at then where you can go from there. So you can, once you're done looking at this, you could rate yourself using the arrow Tool, so that's up on the top left, right above where you see the slide. And if you click that and then click where you feel like you are, it'll put an arrow. So I'll give you guys a few seconds to read through this and then rate yourself. So we see a couple people jump right in. They're in the level 3. So I think that's a really definitely a good place to be. You definitely have strong partnerships, but there's also definitely places to grow, and you can kind of see where you can grow when you look at level 4. So we have a lot of people in that 2 and 3 area. Thanks so much for sharing. This is great. A level 2, a level 4. So this is kind of an example of the process that you can go through. I appreciate you guys kind of all being honest about where you are and where you feel like you're located. And again, this is an example of where you can feel like you're moving forward. So this is great. So NYLC has rubrics like this for all of the 8 K-12 standards for service learning practice. And again, you can find those on the GSN. So moving forward, so once you kind of look at all of the areas that you want to assess yourself on, it's really time to identify areas for growth and improvement. So again, these are the rubrics that NYLC uses for building on service learning quality. But if you need your own rubric or there's other rubrics that you're working on, remember it's important to make sure that everyone is clear on what you're assessing and what those rubrics look like. So once you've assessed all your areas on your rubric, it's time to kind of identify your areas for growth and improvement. And we really encourage that you pick a couple to focus on, that you don't try to jump in and tackle all 8 standards for quality practice all at once, but maybe focus on 1 or 2. Remember that also that assessing is a process, and maybe if you don't get, you maybe want to pick 1 or 2 things to begin with, and then you can also, your next time around, you can continue working on those, and maybe you fold in another rubric. So if you focused on meaningful service and reflection this time, maybe you'll focus on diversity next time. I think our guidance is really focusing on places where you think you can make a difference, being realistic about your capacity, looking at where you already have momentum. If there's somewhere where you're really strong already in partnerships and you really feel like you're almost there and you're almost ready to move to the next step, maybe that's a really good place to focus your energy. And then also looking at places, are there changes that need to happen before another change can happen? So that you really realize that youth voice is low in the project, and you really want to build that before you jump into working on partnerships. So I had it on the screen in front of you, we kind of have the service learning self-assessment report. So this is an example of a place where you can kind of put where you rate on all of the rubrics, and you can kind of use this as your guide for targeting areas of improvement. We also encourage, when looking at and identifying what you're going to do and what you're going to tackle, to make sure that your goals are SMART goals. So lots of people use SMART. I'm sure lots of you guys are familiar with that, and really making sure that your goals are specific, they're measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And we'll kind of look at this more when we look at an example of what planning for the future looks like, to make sure that our goals do fit these areas. So in planning for the future, this is kind of a template for what we think is important to look at. So as you can see, there's a goal, so your area that you're targeting, an objective, so that specific change that needs to occur for you to meet your goal. There are actions, so things that need to be done to make that change happen. evidence, and that's your measurement of success. So really looking at how can you prove, or what sort of resources or documents or examples can you use to prove that you were successful, the individuals that are needed to implement, and then also the completion date. So going back to thinking about partnerships, here's an example of this form filled out around improving partner relationships. So the goal is to increase community partner involvement by having them part of the project planning. We kind of laid out some action steps for what that looks like, and also some measurements of how we're going to prove that. So now I want to take a quick look at how we know if it's a SMART goal. So first, looking at making sure that the project or the goal is specific. So instead of just saying I want to improve my community partner relationships, we really looked at having them being involved in the planning of the project. That's how we were going to show that they that goal was being improved. So then to look to make sure that they're measurable, instead of putting no number next to it, we really focused on setting a number. So we would identify 6 possible community partners, and then we would have agreements with 2 of those community partners. And I think this is really good because then you have something to measure yourself against. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And then also looking if it's attainable. So we didn't say we want as many community partners as possible. We really focused on making sure that we had 6 community partners, considering that to be a reasonable amount to reach out to, and knowing, this depends on your class size and the capacity of your students, capacity of the people facilitating the project. Even looking at your community, maybe there's only a certain number of community partners there. Also looking just kind of in general if the goal is relevant. So this was, we decided this was really relevant to our project because community partnerships were important. So it wasn't kind of a goal that was off, kind of very kind of a pie in the sky goal, but this was really relevant to what we were doing and how we were going to complete our project. And then again, that it's timely. So we set a date that was realistic, that we really felt like we needed to have this project or this task completed by. So that's kind of what this could look like. This is how we do it. Of course, you can use a different way in your own project, but we really think it's important to lay these goals out. So instead of just having them kind of floating in the back of your head, that you really document them and write them down, and that everyone is on the same page about what is being accomplished and what you're working towards. So you might think if you're trying to improve your service learning project, you kind of identify what you want to work on, you have a plan for the future. And then I just wanted to share some resources that are available for your service learning practice. So this is the list. The website is list.nylc.org. And the list is really based on all around the K-12 service learning standards for quality practice. As you can see across the bottom, you can click on one of those and you can really dig deeper into all of these standards. So we're going to go back to our partnership example. One of the resources available is a document around planning effective partnerships. So here you can use this with students or with a group as a whole, and this really looks at what your school's mission is and what your school or organization wants to accomplish, and then also the mission of the organization that you're planning to work with. So this is a really great resource that you can use to help strengthen and deepen your service learning practice. So after doing a quick rundown kind of through that process, hopefully that gave you a good overview and some knowledge of some resources that are available to you to deepen your service learning practice. It'd be great if you guys could share with me, now that hopefully you have your juices flowing, around what will your first step to deepening your service learning practice be. So to do that, you can either share it in the chat box like we did before, or you can use the text tool. So that's right next to the arrow that you found before. And if you click on it and then click on the screen, you can type what your first step leaving this webinar will be to deepening your service learning practice. So someone sharing on the chat box that they're going to work on increasing youth voice. So I think there's some definite, there's some great resources in the list that'll allow you to do that, and some great videos for what youth voice looks like and what it can look like as a quality practice. And it's definitely important for the service learning as well. Is there anyone else who's interested in sharing? So setting specific goals to improve transformational learning. I think that's really great to make sure that those goals aren't just that you're just making improvements or that students are having a better time, but those making sure that they're specific is really great. Increasing reflection activities, have more youth plan events instead of just being on the team. I think that's really great that you're having them lead the team. Begin strategizing with colleagues. I think that's really helpful. I think this, we're really hoping that you take this back to your community or to your school or to your organization and share what going deeper and what an assessment of your project can look like. Awareness around root issues. I think that's really important to kind of growing and going deeper. So thanks everyone for sharing. Those are really great, and hopefully you'll take those into account and then share what you come up with on the Generator School Network. So that's kind of the end of my presentation to you guys today. I just want to open it up to see if there's any questions, and you can feel free again to use the chat box to share those questions. Hopefully I can answer them, or I can point you towards resources that will answer them. So one of the, while you guys are kind of thinking about your questions, and I can kind of talk about how you can increase youth voice. I know that was a couple, some people talked about that and how youth voice can be increased. Yeah, and we can definitely, if you're looking to increase any of these, including youth voice, we just got back from the National Youth Leadership Training. So that's one way you can, students can attend that, or we can really work with you on how to address youth voice in your community. So that's one way to look at youth voice. I think there's lots of different activities that we can think about, and if you have questions about what those would be, we can help you out. Okay, so if you have questions, I'll give my contact information at the end, and I'd be happy to share those with you. I just want to point you again towards some of our resources that we have. The GSN is at gsn.nylc.org, and if you go to topics, you can find a topic around going deeper in service learning. So that's where this webinar recording will be posted. I know some of you are having issues accessing this or hearing this webinar, so we can help you with that. That'll be posted there along with the rubrics that I talked about as well, and then some other of those resources that I referenced. NYLC.org is a great place to learn more about service learning and learn more about the trainings that we have to offer, as well as our National Service Learning Conference and other conferences and events that we put on. And then the list, like I spoke about before, these are really great resources for you to build and focus on some of those service learning standards. And you can find that at list@nylc.org. And then finally, here is my contact information. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have, or hopefully point you in the right direction. So if you, I know there was just a quick, so there's I just want to answer a couple of questions that have come through. The GSN website will have the recording. Marcus will send a follow-up email that will also include the recording. So hopefully you'll be able to access it and really dig deeper into service learning and going deeper. And then also, I know Andrew asked if there are online resources to assist professors in developing discipline-specific reflection questions. NYLC doesn't have any specific to disciplines for professors. There is a topic on the DSN that really focuses on reflection, and there are reflection questions on there for students as well as leaders or educators, and I think those might be helpful to at least get you started. Oh, and someone just shared that Campus Compact, which is a really great resource for higher ed and service learning, has discipline-specific sample syllabi. So their page might be really helpful to you as well, Andrew. Does anyone else have any questions? We'll stay on for a few seconds in case something comes to you. And again, feel free to contact me if you have any other questions, or find us on the DSN and make a comment in that topic, and we'll be happy to kind of help you out and share what we know and put you in the right direction of other resources. But otherwise, I hope this webinar was helpful and interesting, and you definitely gained something from it and have ideas for how to go deeper in your own service learning. So thanks very much for joining us, and we'll hopefully see you online on the DSN.